Sarah Martinez had always been proud of her tattoo, but today felt different. As she walked through the busy corridors of the Naval Medical Center in San Diego, she noticed the usual stares and whispers that followed her wherever she went. The intricate design on her right arm caught everyone's attention, but not for the reasons most people assumed. The tattoo was a beautiful piece of art that covered most of her upper arm. It featured an eagle with spread wings, surrounded by anchor chains and crossed tridents. Below the eagle were the words, "Honor, Courage, Commitment," written in elegant script. Most people who saw it assumed Sarah was just another military wannabe who had gotten some random military-themed tattoo to look tough. Sarah worked as a civilian nurse at the medical center, and she had been dealing with comments about her tattoo for months. Some of her co-workers thought it was inappropriate for a civilian to display military symbols so prominently. Others whispered that she was probably trying to impress the military personnel who came through the hospital. On this particular Tuesday morning, Sarah was assigned to the emergency ward. The hospital was busier than usual, with several training exercises taking place at the nearby base. Young recruits and seasoned veterans alike were coming in for routine checkups and minor injuries from their training sessions. As Sarah moved between patients, taking vital signs and assisting doctors, she could hear the familiar snickers and comments from a group of new recruits waiting in the corner. They were pointing at her tattoo and making jokes among themselves. "Look at that nurse," one of them said, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "She's got more military ink than some of the guys in our unit, and she's not even enlisted." Another recruit laughed and added, "Probably got it done at some cheap parlor downtown. Thinks it makes her look cool or something." A third recruit, who seemed to be the leader of the group, spoke up with a smirk. "I bet she doesn't even know what those symbols mean. Just picked them out of a book because they looked pretty." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she continued her work professionally. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before, and she knew that responding would only make things worse. Instead, she focused on caring for her patients and tried to ignore the cruel laughter echoing through the ward. The comments continued throughout the morning. During her break, Sarah overheard two military wives discussing her tattoo in the break room. They were questioning why a civilian would choose to get military symbols tattooed on her body, suggesting it was disrespectful to those who had actually served. "It's stolen valor in ink form," one of them said dramatically. "She's wearing symbols she has no right to display." Sarah's supervisor, Mrs. Henderson, had also received complaints about the tattoo from some of the military personnel's families. Mrs. Henderson was a kind woman, but she was under pressure from higher-ups to maintain a certain image at the medical center. "Sarah, honey," Mrs. Henderson said quietly, pulling her aside during lunch. "I know you're a wonderful nurse, but I've been getting some complaints about your tattoo. Maybe you could consider covering it up while you're at work? I don't want any trouble for you." Sarah nodded politely, but felt her heart sink. She had never covered the tattoo before, and doing so now felt like she would be betraying something important. However, she understood the difficult position her supervisor was in and agreed to think about it. The afternoon brought a new wave of patients, including a group of Navy SEALs who had been injured during a particularly intense training exercise. As they waited for treatment, Sarah noticed them staring at her tattoo just like everyone else had been doing all day. One of the SEALs, a muscular man with several scars on his arms, nudged his teammate and pointed toward Sarah's tattoo. "Check that out," he said with a dismissive tone. Another civilian playing dress-up with military ink. His teammate, equally intimidating, chuckled and replied, "Probably thinks she's supporting the troops or something. These people have no idea what these symbols actually represent." A third SEAL joined the conversation, shaking his head in apparent disgust. "It's insulting, really. We risk our lives for these symbols, and civilians just slap them on their skin because they think it looks cool." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she continued her rounds. The day had been particularly difficult, with more comments and stares than usual. She began to wonder if maybe everyone was right. Maybe she should have the tattoo removed or at least covered up permanently. As the afternoon wore on, word about Sarah's tattoo spread throughout the medical center. More staff members and patients began taking notice, and the whispers grew louder. Some people were openly pointing and making comments, while others just stared with disapproving looks. Dr. Williams, one of the senior physicians, approached Sarah near the end of her shift. He was a veteran himself and had always been respectful to her, but today he looked concerned. "Nurse Martinez," he said in a low voice, "I think we need to discuss your choice of body art. It's causing quite a stir around here, and I'm not sure it's appropriate for our workplace environment." Sarah felt completely defeated. Everyone seemed to be against her, and she was starting to question her own judgment. Maybe she had made a mistake getting the tattoo. Maybe she didn't deserve to wear these symbols that meant so much to the military community. As her shift came to an end, Sarah gathered her things and prepared to leave. The laughter and comments had died down somewhat, but she could still feel eyes on her as she walked through the corridors. She pulled her sweater over her arm, finally giving in to the pressure to hide the tattoo that had brought her so much grief throughout the day. Just as she reached the main entrance, Sarah heard heavy footsteps behind her and a commotion starting to build near the emergency ward. She turned around to see what was happening, but the crowd was too thick for her to see clearly. All she could hear were urgent voices and the sound of someone speaking with unmistakable authority. Unknown to Sarah, her day was about to take a dramatic turn that would change everything she thought she knew about how others perceived her and her right to wear the symbols that adorned her arm. The heavy footsteps belonged to Commander Jake Morrison, a legendary Navy SEAL with over 20 years of service under his belt. He had just finished a briefing at the base and decided to stop by the medical center to check on some of his men who had been injured during training. Commander Morrison was known throughout the military community for his no-nonsense attitude and his fierce loyalty to his team and fellow service members. As he entered the emergency ward, Commander Morrison immediately noticed the tense atmosphere. Several groups of people were huddled together, whispering and pointing toward the nursing station. His trained eye quickly assessed the situation, and his experience told him that something was seriously wrong. One of his injured SEALs, Petty Officer Davis, approached him with a troubled expression. "Sir, you need to see something," Davis said, gesturing toward where Sarah had been working. "There's this civilian nurse here with some interesting ink, and everyone's been giving her a hard time about it all day." Commander Morrison's jaw tightened. He had zero tolerance for unnecessary drama, especially when it interfered with medical care for his men. "What kind of ink are we talking about, Davis?" "Military symbols, sir. Eagle, tridents, the whole works. Everyone's saying she has no right to wear them, that it's disrespectful. But, sir, there's something about that tattoo that looks familiar." Before Commander Morrison could respond, he overheard one of the young recruits from earlier still making comments. "I can't believe they let civilians walk around with fake military tattoos. Someone should report her for stolen valor." The commander's eyes flashed with anger. Stolen valor was a serious accusation, and he wouldn't tolerate anyone throwing that term around casually. He strode over to the group of recruits, his presence immediately commanding their attention. "Gentlemen," he said in a voice that could cut steel, "I understand there's been some discussion about a staff member's tattoo. I'd like to see this tattoo myself before anyone makes any more accusations." The recruits straightened up immediately, recognizing the authority in his voice even though they couldn't see his rank insignia clearly. "Sir, she just left," one of them stammered. "The nurse with the military tattoo. Everyone's been talking about it all day." Commander Morrison turned to the nursing station where Mrs. Henderson was finishing up some paperwork. "Ma'am, I need to speak with the nurse who's been the subject of discussion today, the one with the military-themed tattoo." Mrs. Henderson looked nervous. Commander, I'm afraid Nurse Martinez has already left for the day. There have been some concerns about her tattoo, and honestly, we're not sure how to handle the situation. What kind of concerns? The commander asked, his voice growing more serious. Well, some of our military patients and their families feel that it's inappropriate for a civilian to display military symbols so prominently. They think it's disrespectful to those who have actually served. Commander Morrison's expression darkened. And has anyone bothered to ask this nurse about the story behind her tattoo before making these judgments? Mrs. Henderson looked confused. No, sir. We just assumed. You assumed, the commander repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Let me tell you something about assumptions, ma'am. They can be very dangerous, especially when they're made about people's personal choices without knowing the full story. Dr. Williams appeared, having heard the commotion. Commander Morrison, I'm Dr. Williams. I think there may have been a misunderstanding about one of our nurses. There certainly has been, the commander replied curtly, and I have a feeling it's not the kind of misunderstanding you think it is. Meanwhile, Sarah had made it to the parking garage but had forgotten her keys in her locker. She reluctantly headed back into the building, hoping to avoid any more confrontation. As she walked back through the emergency ward, she was surprised to see a crowd gathered near the nursing station. Commander Morrison was in the middle of addressing the group of recruits who had been making comments about Sarah's tattoo all day. His voice carried clearly through the ward. Let me explain something to all of you about respect and assumptions, he said, his tone sharp and commanding. Before you decide to judge someone based on their appearance, you might want to consider that there could be more to the story than meets the eye. Sarah stopped in her tracks, recognizing that they were still discussing her tattoo. She considered turning around and leaving again, but something about the commander's tone made her curious. One of the recruits spoke up nervously. Sir, we were just saying that civilians shouldn't wear military symbols if they haven't earned them. Commander Morrison's eyes blazed. Earned them? Do you even know what earning means, recruit? Do you know the story behind that tattoo you've all been so quick to criticize? The recruit shook his head, looking increasingly uncomfortable. No, sir. Then let me educate you, the commander continued, his voice rising slightly. That tattoo belongs to someone who has every right to wear those symbols, possibly more right than some of you standing here today. Sarah felt her heart racing. How could this stranger know anything about her tattoo or her right to wear it? She moved closer to the group, staying hidden behind a pillar so she could hear better. Commander Morrison continued his lecture. That nurse you've all been mocking and disrespecting has been caring for wounded warriors, veterans, and active military personnel for years. She's dedicated her life to serving those who serve our country. But more importantly, that tattoo isn't some random collection of military symbols she picked off a wall. He paused, scanning the faces of everyone gathered around him. That tattoo is a memorial. It's a tribute to her brother, Sergeant First Class Miguel Martinez, who was killed in action while serving with my unit in Afghanistan 3 years ago. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she heard her brother's name spoken aloud. She hadn't expected anyone here to know about Miguel or understand the true meaning behind her tattoo. Sergeant Martinez was one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the honor of commanding, the commander continued, his voice now heavy with emotion. He died saving the lives of his fellow soldiers, and he was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star for his heroism. Sarah stepped out from behind the pillar, no longer caring who saw her tears. Commander Morrison noticed her immediately and gestured for her to come forward. This is Sarah Martinez, he announced to the stunned crowd. Sergeant Martinez's sister. The tattoo you've all been so quick to judge contains the exact symbols from her brother's unit insignia, along with the Navy SEAL trident he earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The emergency ward fell completely silent. The recruits who had been making jokes looked ashamed, and the staff members who had complained about the tattoo appeared mortified. Sarah walked slowly toward the commander, still crying but feeling a mixture of relief and grief. She hadn't spoken about Miguel to anyone at work, preferring to keep her personal life private. But hearing someone else honor his memory felt both painful and healing at the same time. "Sir," she said quietly, "thank you for defending my brother's memory. Not many people here knew about him." Commander Morrison's stern expression softened as he looked at Sarah. "Your brother saved my life and the lives of 3 other soldiers on the day he died. I've been looking for a way to properly thank his family ever since." The silence in the emergency ward was broken only by the sound of Sarah's quiet sobs. Commander Morrison placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his tough exterior giving way to genuine compassion. "Sarah, your brother talked about you all the time," he said softly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He was so proud that his little sister was studying to become a nurse. He said you wanted to help heal people the same way he wanted to protect them." Sarah wiped her tears and looked up at the commander with surprise. "He told you about me?" "He told everyone about you," Commander Morrison replied with a small smile. "Miguel carried a picture of you in your nursing school graduation cap. He said it was his good luck charm and that thinking about you saving lives helped him stay focused on saving lives too." The crowd around them began to shift uncomfortably as the full weight of their earlier behavior sank in. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her face red with embarrassment and regret. "Sarah, I am so deeply sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "If I had known, I should have asked you about the tattoo instead of assuming the worst." Dr. Williams also approached, looking equally remorseful. "Nurse Martinez, please forgive our ignorance. We made terrible assumptions without bothering to learn the truth." Commander Morrison turned to address the group of recruits who had been making the cruelest comments throughout the day. "Gentlemen, I believe you have something to say to Miss Martinez." The recruits stepped forward one by one, each offering sincere apologies for their behavior. The young man who had been leading the mocking looked particularly ashamed as he spoke to Sarah. "Ma'am, I'm deeply sorry for my disrespectful comments. I had no right to judge you or your tattoo without knowing the story behind it. Your brother sounds like he was a true hero." Sarah accepted their apologies gracefully, though she was still processing the emotional whirlwind of the day. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Miguel would have wanted me to forgive you. He always believed in second chances." Commander Morrison wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire emergency ward, raising his voice so everyone could hear clearly. "Let this be a lesson to everyone present," he announced. "Before you judge someone's choices, their appearance, or their right to honor something they hold dear, take the time to learn their story. Sarah Martinez has every right to wear those symbols, and anyone who suggests otherwise is disrespecting not only her, but also the memory of a fallen hero." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "Furthermore, I want everyone to understand that supporting our military doesn't require wearing a uniform. Sarah has spent years caring for wounded veterans and active service members. She's seen their pain, helped them heal, and treated them with dignity and compassion. In my book, that makes her as much a part of our military family as anyone." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the commander's words. For months, she had questioned whether she had the right to display her brother's symbols so prominently. The constant criticism and judgment had made her doubt her decision to get the tattoo in the first place. "Sir," she said, her voice stronger now, "I want you to know that I didn't get this tattoo to show off or pretend to be something I'm not. I got it because I missed my brother so much that I wanted to carry a part of him with me always." Commander Morrison nodded understandingly. "Miguel would be proud of that tattoo, Sarah. He'd also be proud of the nurse you've become and the way you've honored his memory through your service to others." One of the Navy SEALs who had been making disparaging comments earlier stepped forward. Ma'am, I owe you an apology, too. I spoke without thinking, and I dishonored your brother's sacrifice with my ignorant words. Sarah looked at the seal with compassion. My brother always said that the strongest warriors are those who can admit their mistakes and learn from them. Thank you for your apology. Dr. Williams cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. I think we all learned something important today about the danger of making assumptions. Moving forward, I expect every member of our staff and every patient in this facility to treat Nurse Martinez with the respect she deserves. Mrs. Henderson nodded in agreement. Sarah, I want you to know that you never have to cover your tattoo again. You have our full support to display it with pride. As the crowd began to disperse, Commander Morrison asked Sarah if they could speak privately. They walked to a quiet corner of the ward where they could talk without being overheard. Sarah, I have something for you, the commander said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to her. This was your brother's. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the box to find Miguel's bronze star medal inside. She gasped and looked up at the commander with tears in her eyes again. I've been trying to find the right time to get this to your family, he explained. Miguel's commanding officer asked me to personally deliver it to his next of kin. I had your parents' address, but when I went there, your mother told me you had moved here to work at this medical center. Sarah held the medal carefully, running her fingers over its surface. I can't believe you went through all that trouble to find me. It wasn't trouble, Commander Morrison replied firmly. Miguel died saving my men. Making sure his family received proper recognition for his sacrifice is the least I could do. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before the commander spoke again. Your brother also wanted me to give you a message if anything ever happened to him. Sarah looked up expectantly, hanging on his every word. He said to tell you that being your big brother was the greatest honor of his life, and that he hoped you would always remember that helping people heal makes you a warrior just like him. Fresh tears flowed down Sarah's face, but this time they were tears of healing rather than pain. For the first time since Miguel's death, she felt truly connected to him and proud of the choices she had made to honor his memory. As her shift officially ended, Sarah walked through the medical center corridors one final time. But this time was different. Instead of whispers and stares of judgment, she received nods of respect and understanding smiles from the staff and patients she passed. Word had spread quickly throughout the medical center about the true meaning behind Sarah's tattoo and the heroic story of her brother. Many people approached her to express their gratitude for her service and to share their own stories of loved ones in the military. Commander Morrison escorted Sarah to the parking garage where he handed her his business card. If you ever need anything, or if anyone ever gives you trouble about that tattoo again, you call me immediately. Sarah smiled and tucked the card safely into her purse. Thank you, Commander, for everything. You've given me more than just my brother's medal today. You've given me back my confidence and my peace of mind. As she drove home that evening, Sarah thought about how dramatically her day had changed. She had started the morning feeling ashamed and questioning her choices, but she was ending it feeling proud and validated in her decision to honor Miguel's memory. The tattoo on her arm would always attract attention. But now Sarah knew that attention didn't have to be negative. Sometimes it just took one person who knew the real story to change everything. And sometimes that person showed up exactly when you needed them most, just like Commander Morrison had done for her that day. Miguel's bronze star now sat safely in a place of honor on her dresser at home. But Sarah knew that the most important memorial to her brother would always be the tattoo on her arm and the compassionate care she provided to others in his memory.